Welcome into episode 168 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm August Trometer.
The end of another year, time to reflect, to look back, and realize just how much stuff hasn't changed. $20 in the security breach on Pump 4, revisited. Last week's communications limits, revisited. And bad passwords, revisited. Could old acquaintance be forgot? Please. Stand by for checklist number 168, brought to you by SecureMac. It only feels like a recap, August. It only feels like a recap. I know people are thinking, oh, look, they're doing a clip show. It's the end of the year. That's an easy thing to do. No, my friends. It only feels like a recap. I mean, yeah, it's the time of year that people look back. I mean, we're doing that, but at the same time, we're looking at what's going on seriously right now. Earlier this year, we brought you news of the Orpak Cytomat and its Swiss cheesy security. That piece from TechCrunch explained Orpak's Cytomat systems monitor the amount of fuel stored in the gas station's tanks, as well as their temperature and pressure. The software also sets the price of the gas and processes card payments. Who cares? Well, the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity Agency did. They said the popular gas station software contained several security vulnerabilities that required low skill to exploit. The advisory, posted by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, gave the Orpak Cytomat software a rare vulnerability severity rating of 9.8 out of 10. I was always told you round up when it gets that bad, but, I guess that 0.2 really makes a difference. Now, it was an interesting story, and if you would like to hear more about it, checklist number 137. Security breach on Pump 4 would be a great way to go. For a similar story, though, just keep listening. Engadget has the credit network Visa saying that cybercrime groups are actively exploiting a weakness in gas station point-of-sale networks to steal credit card data. Now, you may think, I know to look for card skimmers, and that's fantastic. I'm glad you do, but this is not that. What is going on this time, August?
Well, according to Engadget, Visa's fraud disruption teams are investigating multiple incidents where a group of hackers called Fine 8 has defrauded fuel dispenser merchants or gas stations. In each case, the piece says the attackers gained access to the POS networks via malicious emails and other unknown means. They then installed POS scraping software that exploited the lack of security with old-school magstripe cards that lack a chip.
For the record, when we say POS, we're saying point of sale. You can hear it how you want to, but in this context, we're saying point of sale.
I think we mean POS.
Yeah, sure. We can do that if you want to. All right, so let's break that down a bit more. Installing point-of-sale scraping software that targets magstripe cards. How is it that they're more vulnerable than chip cards?
Well, with the magstripe cards, Engadget says the data is apparently sent in an unencrypted form to the main vendor's network, where the thieves have figured out how to intercept it. Then the other problem, kind of like the story we did in May, the POS systems aren't firewalled off from other less critical parts of the network. So bad guys can access important stuff by slipping in through the non-important stuff.
Except none of it's actually non-important.
There's never anything non-important when it comes to technology, but often things are non-obvious. It takes a dedicated security team to be able to do regular audits and to look for ways into the network. When laptop Wi-Fi was cool and new, I'd ward drive just for fun. And one time I came across an IndyCar team's network, and IndyCars are multi-million-dollar vehicles. Turns out the printer was open and available to anyone. So just to be nice, I printed out a message on their own printer that said their network was exposed. And a day later, it was all shut off. But that's an example of something non-obvious. You get access to the printer, then you have potential access to the whole network. And that's one of the reasons why so many IoT things are untrustworthy.
I guess, well, you're talking about something, and I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You're talking about something that people like you will say this is something anyone could do. And I will say, well, no, I can't. Like if I found an open printer, I might be tempted to print like, joke messages. But I would not be able to jump then from that printer to, anything else, basically, except for printing out the joke messages, like I say. But I'm not asking you to confess to anything. You're saying that somebody of your level and let's say on an equal level or higher, somebody who's not just the average John or Jane trying to print something and often having trouble doing so, by the way, you're saying that 201, 301, I mean, leaving anything open does leave you vulnerable to not even James Bond villain level, just like, average bad guy.
Yeah, it's just a vector of an attack. And that's really all they need. And if they have the time, the experience, they can sit there and just figure it out.
The other thing I wanted to hit on from what you said earlier, the attackers gained access to the POS networks via malicious emails and other unknown means. That sounds like another wetware issue.
People, am I right?
Sounds like it.
We've talked about this many times, but most hackers don't act like you see them in the movies. They go after people, not hardware. All they need is your password. And so if they can sort of social engineer that, and you give that information up, they've got the keys to the kingdom.
And then the other unknown means, I mean, is that the open printer story that you were just telling a moment ago? Is that, I mean, somebody like in the Avengers, Tony Stark put a little like metal thing on the side of a computer and suddenly had access to everything. When we're talking about unknown means, I mean, we're still talking about some mistake that somebody made. We're not talking about we flew a drone 30,000 feet above and were able to listen in or something like that.
Sure, either some mistake somebody made, or maybe they've got somebody on the inside who's helping them out. Somebody who has attached a dongle to the network that allows them to pull information. And there's a lot of different ways that they could go about doing this.
Now, I was struck by something else in the Engadget report. It said there's not much that cardholders can do to avoid the attacks, but Visa has advised fuel merchants to encrypt data while it's transferred or use a chip and pen policy. Fuel dispenser merchants should take note of this activity and deploy devices that support chip cards wherever possible, as this will significantly lower the likelihood of these attacks. That's what Visa told the fuel companies. The thing is, though, there are things that cardholders can do, right? Oh,
there's a lot regular folks can do. First, pay cash. You can't hack a Jackson. That's pretty standard. Two, find a better gas station. If yours is manned by a guy sitting outside on a lawn chair next to a dog, it's a safe bet they haven't updated their hardware in a long, long time. Apple Pay, Android Pay, both good options. They tend to be much safer because they essentially change the card numbers for every single transaction. And use the Apple Card. Also, it changes numbers, and it's great to use when the machine doesn't accept mobile payments. And then just plain toss any card that doesn't use a chip and pin. I know chip and pin is such a pain. I hate it. But it's a lot safer than not using it. And we're talking about your money, so keep it safe.
I love the fact that Visa's like, well, there's nothing cardholders can do. And, then some wise guy says, what about using cash, sir? And Visa says, cash. I've heard of it, but I hear bad things. Now, while it may seem like Visa's a bit slow on this, they are putting the hammer down on gas stations. Earlier this year, Engadget says Visa announced that fuel merchants must deploy chip readers by October of 2020. After that, any service stations without the new tech will be liable for any fraud. October of 2020. Hey, it would be great. We can actually do this story next year. And it'll feel like a recap, even though, we promise it won't be a recap.
I feel like I'm already in a time loop.
Apple introduced a new safety feature for kids last week, and part of me bets they wish they hadn't. We actually talked about this on last week's show, checklist number 167. The feature is communication limits for screen time. Now, for adults, we said it was a good way to keep from being distracted. For kids, it is that too, though it's also a safety feature. Or it should have been. TechCrunch explained how it was supposed to work, saying, if this is set up under Screen Time's parental controls, parents get to choose who can contact their children and when, and vice versa. During downtime, parents can also designate which particular contacts the child can message and call, like only mom and dad. But CNBC says that it's learned that the communication limits for kids feature isn't working the way it's supposed to. And I got to say, when it's CNBC finding the hole in your security, you're not having the best day. There are several bugs with the feature, says CNBC, but most importantly, it doesn't protect your kids from talking to strangers on the phone, FaceTime, or other text messages. Apparently, for the feature to work properly, contacts have to be stored to iCloud by default. Now, the first thing that I thought of actually with this is it raised an interesting QA question. You're an Apple developer, you work for Apple, not you, but I'm saying, the average person, the person who worked on this communications limit thing. They're an Apple developer, they work for Apple, they are all iOS, iPad OS, and Mac OS all the time. With those parameters, how easy would this be? I mean, it seems like that would make it pretty easy to miss something like this.
Well, as I said last week, I'm surprised this wasn't baked in when they released it originally. But now that we find that it's got these big holes, I just feel like somebody's asleep at the wheel at Apple. Whether it's QA, security, I'm not sure. But someone's head should be on a chopping block right now. This is ridiculous.
Now, to your way of thinking, is there any chance that developers... I mean, it's bad no matter what. I mean, either they didn't realize that there are people who use things besides all the Apple stuff, or is there a chance that developers chose to be blind to this? I mean, that they decided that they were building this for people 100% in the Apple garden, or was this just blinders they didn't realize they had?
A lot of times bugs like this happen because management wants to rush something out the door. Deadlines and all that crap. Apple has a really unique culture in that they allow people to tap the brakes when they see something wrong. But I'd venture this was just all about being able to announce the feature, and corners got cut. We're seeing more of this from Apple lately, and it's very disappointing and unsettling. What should happen is that the parent is notified that a new contact is being added and can approve or disapprove that contact. That's, to me, seems like the most simple solution.
Now, the thing that makes me think that this can't have been intentional is that it involves kids. It involves child safety. Apparently, if contacts were not stored to iCloud by default, CNBC found that when an unknown number texted a child's phone, the child was given the option to add that number to their address book, which is not supposed to happen. After the kid adds the number to the address book, CNBC says they can call, FaceTime, or text that number, which is not supposed to happen. Additionally, the piece says kids can also skirt the protections using an Apple Watch paired to the iPhone. If they ask Siri on an Apple Watch to text or call any number, it'll go through whether it's in the contact list or not. That is not supposed to happen. Now, it does make sense to me that contacts would have to be stored in iCloud by default, I think. But can you illustrate why you think that might be the case? Well,
first of all, you said it at the top. CNBC, great work here, guys. I got to give them a lot of applause for, just digging in and finding this stuff. In terms of your question, the idea of everything being stored in iCloud is a really good thing, but being able to add a new person troubles me. This is one of those didn't see that coming issues, I think, or just plain sloppiness. Either way, it definitely needs correcting.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier, though. I mean, it seems like, it makes sense to me that all of this would go through iCloud because iCloud is the thing that looks at all of my devices and says, hey, he just updated this on his phone. He's probably going to want that updated on his iPad as well. So we'll go ahead and hook those things up.
And in theory, it would let your parents also see those things.
Right. Well, that's the thing, though, because, this is the whole point. If the parents are storing their stuff in Gmail or something like that, if they're storing it with Google or some other thing, then they're not living the iCloud life. And so that's why, it's messed up. They should have... I'm sorry, I keep starting and stopping. I was wondering, as we were talking about this, like I'm some big security dude, but I was wondering as we were preparing for this show, would it be a better solution to actually have to build a separate list with your child? So I'm a parent, my kid has an iPhone, I want to keep track of what's going on. Instead of building it into iCloud, write a separate app where I'm actually sitting down and talking with my child. And again, it's my imaginary child who is perfect. I never have any problem with my imaginary kid. But would it be better to, sit down and talk with the child about, who's going to be on their list and why, who's not going to be on their list and why? Plus, if you can make that a feature of the app, you can, keep storing your contacts in Gmail or wherever you want to, but still get notifications, from this app.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as I mentioned earlier, if you let parents know when a contact is added, at the very minimum, they could ask their child, who is this person? So, a child and a parent can at least have some communication about who they're talking to.
Now, what's funny is, as I'm saying all of that out loud, because those notes were written down, as I'm saying that out loud, that's a whole bunch of the apps that we talked about earlier this year. Hey, we're doing the recap thing. The apps that we were talking about earlier this year that were actually from third parties, where it was like, oh, you want to keep your child safe? Great. Just give me all of this information about your child. And I promise, now I know it looks like my fingers are crossed, but I promise I will keep your child safe. Is the difference there? We've decided that we trust Apple enough that we're going to go ahead and write a special app where Apple plays nanny in a way that even iCloud doesn't.
I think it would be better if Apple served as kind of the negotiator between multiple services so that, the Gmails of the world can coexist with contacts.
Now, apparently, none of these workarounds, by the way, that we talked about work if the child's iPhone is in downtime. So that's good news. Although, as we discussed last week, I'll tell you honestly, if I was a betting man, I would have bet that the first workaround that they found, because I don't know if you remember the notes from last week, we had said that if a kid, makes an emergency phone call, then all the restrictions are off for 24 hours so that people can get in touch with the child and the child can get in touch with them and make sure that they're safe, right? I honestly figured by this week we would just hear about a bunch of 911 calls so that kids could text whoever they wanted to. Now, Apple does say that it's working on an across-the-board fix. In the meantime, it does suggest that people force contacts to sync with iCloud, which I assume if you didn't have that before, you didn't want that and you still don't. But let's go ahead and say that is something that people are willing to do to make this whole thing work. Mr. Trometer, will you please tell people how it's done?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. To do that, according to CNBC, you open Settings and then you open Contacts. And then you select Default Account. And then you change that to iCloud from any other setting, like Gmail or some other account.
We will play the easiest guessing game ever in a moment. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Sometimes we all do dumb things. We lock our keys in our car. We lose something we need. Sometimes we get tricked into downloading files or clicking links in emails or on websites that end up being detrimental. Did you pick up something bad? Tracking cookies or malware maybe? Find out and get rid of it with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Keep your machine clean with MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did your pulse just quicken? Are you wondering how I got your password? While I would love to think that no one hearing these words would ever use a password like that, a piece from Apple Must indicates that there's a pretty good chance that at least some of you do or have. Armed with your password, the piece says, people you don't know can ransack your digital life, steal your money, and land you in a lot of trouble. That's why Splash Data keeps putting out its list of the 25 worst passwords, and not to make people feel bad, but to get people used to the idea that easy to remember passwords are also easy to guess. If you're looking for good news, for the first time in the Splash Data list's 9-year history, the word password is not one of the top 2 passwords. The bad news, though, it is still in the top 5. Morgan Slane, CEO of Splash Data, says, invoking the name of the president or any other celebrity as your password is a dangerous decision, one that hackers will exploit and put you at substantial risk of having your identity stolen. I gotta say, though, using the name of a celebrity or the president would be better than anything in the top 25 list. I'm not going to read them all. We will make sure that the list is up in the show notes for this episode at securemac.com/checklist. I will read to you the top 5, though, just so you have an idea of what we're talking about. As I mentioned before, number 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Getting a little tricky for number 2. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Hey, lots of digits.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, you need a lot of them, August. You need a lot of them. QWERTY, QWERTY is number 3. Password is number 4. And variation on the theme, number 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, some of the more tricksy passwords in the top 25 include number 8, I love you, number 20, welcome, number 22, princess, and number 23, dragon. This really is not a 2019 recap. It's more like a recap of every year since we started the checklist. A couple of years before you joined this show, actually, is when I remember doing our first password show, one of many, I think. And yet it's apparently one that we need to keep doing. We'll get to best practices for passwords in a moment, but remind me, is there any such thing in your opinion as an unimportant password? I mean, is there a type of account that I might have that you'd be fine seeing me use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as the password?
The only time I'd ever say something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is okay is if you're a developer and you're developing a site on your local machine that will never have that password be used in the wild. And even that is kind of spooky because you don't want that password to end up on the production server through some sort of database, changeover. So you got to be super, super careful. Always use a strong, unique password. I'll sleep better at night. Ken will definitely sleep better at night. And trust me, you will sleep better at night.
Remind me, I'm thinking there's a danger even of just using a dummy password like that because it's one of those things where it gets to production And somebody's like, I want to say that happened with Apple a while ago, didn't it? Where it turns out there was a backdoor that nobody even remembered was there, that people had forgotten about, that it was in production years earlier. And somebody had put in just like a quick shortcut to get from point A to point B in the code. And it was meant to be closed or tamped down or whatever. But they forgot to close it. Nobody knew it was there. And then one day somebody was like, seriously? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
You know, if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is in your database on your local machine, I'm probably going to give you a tisk. But if you've hard coded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into your site, I'm going to yell and scream. Okay. Because that's just not acceptable.
I was afraid you were going to graduate to a tut-tut, but if you're saying yelling and screaming, that's bad. Now, I know you're going to say password manager, but what can people do to make sure that they're using strong passwords?
Password manager?
Okay. Why?
You know, password managers do all of the heavy lifting for you. They generate those strong, unique passwords. They remember them for you so you don't have to. And they really are essential to password security in the modern age.
Now, does it have to be a third-party password manager, or do you feel good enough now about Apple Keychain that you'd be like, you know what, don't bother with, all these other things. What's happening in the Apple ecosystem, especially with Apple Keychain, should have you covered? Well,
I would go so far to say that Apple's implementation does count as a password manager. That said, it's not as feature complete as some of the other products out there, but it is baked right into the OS. The problem is if you're a Chrome fan, it really doesn't integrate well. If you stick with Safari, it's what I would call good enough. Okay. And it's a whole lot better than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, that begins to answer my question then. My next question, that is, maybe I don't want to spend money. Maybe I have trust issues. Maybe I'm afraid of being locked out of my stuff for reasons that defy your understanding. Let's say I've decided I will not use a password manager. What are some other tips for password safety?
Part of me doesn't want to answer this question. I'm a believer in password managers. I use password managers. Whatever your fear is, whatever your reason, I'd encourage you to just get past it and use a password manager. But if I absolutely can't convince you, at least do these things. 1, use a strong, unique password for every single site. That means everything that you log into should be different, from Facebook to Amazon to your bank. Never use a password that contains any of your personal information, your birthday, your anniversary, your wife's birthday, your dog's name. It doesn't matter. All of these are in a database somewhere, and they'll be used against you by a hacker. Always make sure you have two-factor authentication turned on. We've talked about that a lot here. If a hacker somehow gets your password, this is an additional layer of security that will protect you. Passphrases are easier to remember than strong passwords, but only use these as a last resort. I've said this before, but if you can pronounce it, it's probably not safe enough. And it's not because you can't have a long, secure passphrase. It's just because you're more likely to use that same phrase on multiple sites. And then number 5, seriously though, just use a password manager. You'll thank yourself.
And then, as always, the other thing that I would ask people to do is to share this information. Apple Must says what makes the splash data list important is their estimate that almost 10% of people have used at least one of the 25 worst passwords on this year's list. And nearly 3% of people have used the worst password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe that's not you, and that's great. In fact, as I said at the beginning of this, I suspect most people, if not all people listening to a show like this one, would not use a password like that. But you've all got cousins, you've all got moms and dads and people who don't listen to shows like this. So if you have it in you, maybe share the information that you're finding here, or just share this show, and then you can go back to not sharing with anybody. We'll do it. That's fine.
Just because the password is secret doesn't mean it's a secret.
Oh, nice. See? You could get them that on a t-shirt, bundle around a CD of this show. You will, of course, have to download and burn the CD. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. Hey, share that with those people too, because there they will find notes for this show, notes for the last show that we did, notes for all the shows we've done, and they can actually listen to all those shows right there too. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we will talk to you soon.